Is a non-disclosure agreement or an NDA really worth the paper that it's written on? Is it even worth the trouble of drafting and signing one? Today, we're going to dive into some personal stories about non-disclosure agreements. This is Stuff You Should Know About IP. Today's episode of Stuff You Should Know About IP is brought to you by the Patent Lawyer magazine. If you want to stay up to date with everything that's going on in the world of IP and patents, go to www.patentlawyermagazine.com. Each issue is free to read for up to 8 weeks. That's www.patentlawyermagazine.com for global news in the world of patents. All right, Tom, let's talk about NDAs.
NDAs.
The mothership of NDAs.
Oh yeah. So NDAs. First, just for those of you who don't know what an NDA is, I think everybody knows what an NDA is, but essentially it is a document, a contract that governs the rights and obligations of the parties in connection with confidential disclosures that they make to one another in connection with the relationship. So
what?
Yeah. So I'm going to disclose to you, you're going to disclose to me. The NDA essentially tells us, how we have to protect those documents.
Okay.
That's it.
I'm going to tell you a secret, so let's sign a deal. You won't tell anyone else that secret.
Yeah, right. And it's just about confidential records. It's not about like employment agreements and assignment of intellectual property rights. It's just governing the disclosure relationship, the confidential disclosure relationship with the parties. So, I was thinking about this podcast this morning on my way back from my swim workout because I was thinking about this crazy NDA discussion I had recently with respect to a friend of mine. So a friend of mine calls me up it happens all the time. I get phone calls like every week from somebody, they want free legal advice, right?
Yeah.
So this friend of mine calls me and he says, hey, could you review this NDA? I'm trying to become a vendor to this company. And I said, sure, send me the NDA. So I read it, and it's one of these classic obnoxious NDAs that often are provided by big companies to little companies, right? Because they have all the leverage. And this NDA essentially says any disclosures they make, and by the way, it's one-way NDA, it's disclosures from them to my friend. Any disclosures they make are protected. They could be written with no markings. They could be oral disclosures with no reduction to writing and mark. In other words, any disclosures, and they don't even have to tell this guy when the disclosures are confidential. So I said, look, why don't we schedule a meeting with this person? I'm sure I can, have a rational conversation and they will see the error in their ways, right? So he sets up a meeting and this woman who's the chief counsel for this big company, she gets on the phone and basically she says, look, and she's a very nice lady. She says, look, the reason we do that is because our engineers, we never know what they're going to say or we don't know. So we just want to make sure everything's protected. And I said, well, wouldn't it be easier if you just trained them on NDAs and disclosures and then have them mark confidential records? And she said, oh, no, that'd be way too much trouble. So I said, so essentially what you're doing is putting the burden on my friend to, know what is confidential and what is not confidential. And her response is, no problem. If he has any question, just ask. So I said, wait. So in other words, throughout the course of the day, there's disclosures. Every single time my friend is not sure whether it's a confidential disclosure, he has to stop the conversation and say, hey, was that confidential? And she says, well, it doesn't have to be that extreme, but essentially, yes. And I started to explain very politely how that's ridiculous. Very politely, though, because, my friend wants to do a deal with them. And then she went from this really nice person to a little bit mean. And she essentially said, take it or leave it. Okay. So, yeah, that was it. I mean, it's like, okay, understand your objections. I don't care. If you want to be a vendor to us, sign the document. If you don't, walk away. I don't care. And I'm thinking, my God, this is insanity. So, I was thinking about, NDAs and the fact that no one reads them, right? Nobody, this friend of mine happened to know me, or he would have just signed it. And by the way, we had to sign it because he needed a deal. So I basically said, do you have any flexibility on this oral disclosure, no marking thing? Nope, don't have any flexibility. So I said, okay, we'll get back to you with any edits that we have, but we'll keep the oral disclosures with no marking in. So I go back to this friend of mine and I said, okay, here's a new invention. We are going to invent the one-day NDA. Okay, the one-day NDA. In fact, it even sounds pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
And he said, wait, what does that mean? I said, we're going to create an NDA that has a one-day disclosure period. So in other words, yeah, they could send us an oral disclosure. They could say something and we're bound by it, but it's only going to be one day. And at the end of that day, you're going to send an email that says nothing was disclosed today, just to make sure that we're clear, which will shift the burden to them to then tell us what was confidentially disclosed. So I added it. We'll accept your oral disclosure thing, but it's a one-day disclosure period.
What was it originally?
It was, 3 years.
3 years.
It's like a 3-year agreement. And by the way, it's typical. It's so standard. Yeah, it's like people just sign these things at whatever. Okay, we're under NDA. We're good. We can say anything. Yeah. So I change it to one day. We get back on the phone together. And she says, this is crazy. Why would we do a one-day disclosure period? And I said, it's not that crazy if you think about it. You can have your people disclose orally. We're only going to really do a one day of disclosure anyway. So why don't we just stick with the day that we're disclosing, and then everybody's happy. So finally, we come to an agreement that it's going to be a 2-week disclosure. So we actually signed the document. It's a 2-week disclosure. So I tell my guy, look, every single day of this 2-week period, just send a very friendly email and say, there were no confidential disclosures made by either party today. Right. So he did that every day for 2 weeks, never got an email back, right? Because he wasn't sending them. Oh, go ahead, Ray. What was that?
There's no confidential information sent.
Right. So he sends an email every day, but he doesn't send it to the lawyer, okay? Because he's not working with the lawyer. He's working with the senior engineers. Right. So he sends them an email every day, very polite, like so soft that you can't even really tell it's anything. It's like, hey, great day today. By the way, just so that we're clear, there was no confidential disclosures made. If there were any, just send us an email back telling us what was disclosed. Right. So soft and gentle.
Right. So there may have been, because those engineers weren't trained on confidential information.
Right. Like she already told us they weren't trained, and she wouldn't train them because it was too much of a hassle. They won't listen. So it turns out he doesn't get one email back through the entire 2-week period, and then the disclosure period ends. But here's the funny thing. They're not trained on NDAs, right? Yeah. So they keep disclosing stuff because the relationship goes on for a couple more months. And they're like, they just keep disclosing. That's the thing. Nobody reads NDAs except the lawyers, and the lawyers aren't involved in the disclosures,
You got to know the important dates in the NDA. And that's a question that I have for you. There's the start and the end date, but there's also, isn't there another date that says for how long that information has to be kept secret?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Ray. There's basically 3 important dates. And by the way, these are disclosure dates, right? Mm-hmm. When does the disclosure period begin? Because if you start disclosing before the period begins, arguably those disclosures are not protected, regardless of what the NDA says. Every once in a while, they'll say, any past disclosures, but that's a little awkward, right?
Right.
So number 2 is when the disclosure period ends. And in our case, it was 2 weeks. Number 3 is when the confidentiality period ends, which is how long do you have to keep these, confidential? And sometimes it's 3 years. Sometimes if, they say if they're trade secrets, it's as long as this is an enforceable trade secret, so there's those 3 dates. And again, hardly anyone reads them. But what first got me turned on to NDAs, don't keep in mind, I'm a lawyer, right? I've been a lawyer for decades. I start working at this company, Manning and Napier Information Services, okay? and it's the predecessor to the company I founded, IP.com. And I meet this guy, Don Davis, who is like one of those characters that's in your top 15, right? Like we go through our life, we meet thousands of people, but there's like 15 people that you're like, this person adds color to the world. You know what I mean? Flavor. They're just, they're characters. And my friend Don Davis, who became a lifelong friend, in fact, he died. So technically we were lifelong friends because he died a few years ago, but he was a mentor and a friend. But we first meet on this deal we're doing. He's on the other side of it. And we're dealing with this really eccentric, innovative guy who's the CEO of his company, who he might even be watching because he and I are friends, but I won't say the name. But anyway, he's like this brilliant innovator guy, right? And you talk to this guy and he is a ball of energy. 100 ideas come out of his mouth in an hour, right? Only like 10 of them are good because you got to filter, but 10 of them are great, you know? So I finish a meeting with this energetic ball of fire who's the CEO. That night, I get an email from Don Davis, and he says, he lists all the disclosures that were made. Now, mind you, he's not even at the meeting, okay? So I call Don, who I don't really know that well at this point, you know, and I'm like, you know, hey, Don, how's it going? Got this message from you, and you list like 20 disclosures that were made when I was with your CEO, but I made half of those disclosures to him, okay? So, you know, what are you hoping to gain by this? So he's, you know, this all business, nice guy, but all business. He goes, Tom, it's no problem. This is why we do. This is why I do this, because I don't want there to be any confusion downstream about who disclosed what to who. So I wanted you to have this. And I said, yeah, but Don, you're defaulting as you disclosed everything to me when that's not true. So he just pauses, silence. It's a good thing you called me back then, isn't it? Okay? Like, that's it. And I'm thinking, if it wasn't for the fact that I was a lawyer and like a little bit savvy, I'm way more savvy now, but I might have just let it go. And then he has made all these disclosures to me. And now in the future, if I ever use any of my own ideas that I disclose to them, I'm at risk of breach of an NDA that was in place. So Don, so we work it out that day. And he said, well, which ones were yours? And I tell him, and he says, okay, I'll send you a modified email, which he does. But he would always send me these memos and I'd always call him. And then we got to be good friends. And then he and I were working together. So now he's on my side sending these emails, right?
Right.
But Don Davis, then he died a few years ago. But before he died, he calls me one day and he says, hey, Tom, I want to show you like this great NDA I just created. Because, you know, everybody's got their NDA templates. And it's always funny when you read an NDA template and there's like a misspelling somewhere. Then like you read someone else's NDA template, there's the same misspelling. It's like they must have shared this document, you know? But so Don sends me his ultimate NDA that he wants to use, like in every case.
Of all
the
NDAs.
Mothership. And I'll just go through a couple of quick points that I love. First is, you know, the natural thing. All disclosures must be marked as confidential. If they're not marked, they're not confidential. Second, all oral disclosures must be reduced to writing and marked, or they're not confidential. Now, that's been in NDAs. I've seen that before. And sometimes it's like a week or 2 weeks. He does 2 days. And his argument is, if you don't do it in 2 days, stuff's going to change in your mind. You don't remember what happened a week ago, right? It's going to build in your mind. It's just like stories we tell, always get better as we get older. So number 3 is, let's see. Oh, yeah, I love this one. You cannot make a disclosure under this NDA unless a disclosure representative is present at the time of the disclosure. Those disclosures are listed on this NDA. So in other words, if I'm the rep for our company, Executive IP, and you are not, if a disclosure is made to Ray, but I'm not in the room, it doesn't fall under the NDA. And his rationale was, no one reads these things, so I'm going to be certain that there is a person in the room who is knowledgeable about the NDA such that they'll know what to do next. right?
Right.
So I'm like, no one's going to sign this. But that was in his NDA. It was the NDA rep concept of Don Davis.
Huh.
And then the last one, no one would sign either, but I love it. And that is, at the end of every session, there will be a conference. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, it doesn't say in the NDA. There will be a conference among the parties to list all the confidential disclosures that were made during that session by each party, and each party signs off on it.
Wow.
Think about how great that would be. You have a meeting, the meeting ends, and you say, look, let's spend 5 minutes. Let's agree on what we have disclosed to each other that's not marked, right? So if it's marked and disclosed in writing, no problem. We don't have to talk about that. But let's list the oral disclosures that were made during this meeting by who, and let's agree upon them.
Right.
Pretty clever idea, right?
Yeah, I love how and really kind of all of these ideas, they account for human weakness.
Yes, exactly.
Because we all have the same human weaknesses, and these account for them. Why would, okay, I mean, I think I know the answer to this question, but why wouldn't anybody sign that?
Yeah, that's a great question. The reason I say that is, here's what happens in the world of NDAs and every agreement under the sun. That is, whoever has more leverage controls the terms of the agreement, right?
Right.
It's just like that one deal that lady said, take it or leave it, because my friend needed them more than they needed him. So when I say no one will ever sign it, here's what I really mean. One side or the other will have to force the other side to sign it. So like if I'm a little guy and I go to you and you're a big guy and I say, here, sign my Don Davis NDA, you're going to say, I'm not signing that.
Right.
Because of human weakness, right? Human weakness, what you just said, because my engineers are never going to agree to that. But everybody should sign that document. Everybody should sign the Don Davis document because, I mean, think about it. Having an NDA rep, all that really means is you're going to have a lead engineer that is trained on NDAs.
Yeah.
And, it doesn't necessarily have to be listed in the contract, but at least at the meeting, everybody says, okay, who's the NDA rep? It just becomes cultural, right?
Right.
You don't say, because here's what always happens, Ray. You get into the room with a bunch of people and someone says, hey, wait, hold on. Do we have an NDA signed? And someone vaguely nods yes. That's enough. Disclose everything you want, right?
Right.
Doesn't matter. Somebody vaguely nodded yes. Okay, we're good. We have an NDA in place. No one's read it. No one knows whether it's one way or two way. No one knows whether it's expired. No one knows what the purpose is listed. But everybody just says, hey, we have an NDA in place. Let's go ahead. Great. We can say anything. We're free. We can do anything.
Yeah.
But Don's idea is a good one. Who's the NDA rep? Who's actually read this thing from each side? Oh, I read it, and then Jane Doe read it. Okay, good. We're good. Okay. Now we know that those people are knowledgeable about the NDA. And then what's wrong with spending 5 minutes at the end of a meeting doing what I made my friend do every day anyway for that 2-week period, which is just say, okay, do we agree there was no oral disclosures that were confidential? No, hold on. I told you about this thing. We're like, okay, let's just click. Okay, then we just send it around, email back. Yep, that was said. Put it in a PDF. We're all good.
See, if I were the CEO or the general counsel of one of these big companies, I would have and we had a lot of people signing NDAs all the time who probably weren't reading them.
Right, or storing them.
Right. I would have an executive summary, one paragraph that's attached to the front of the NDA that explains in plain English how you should behave in relation to this NDA and the relationship with the other party.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Like it's not included in the contract. It's just kind of a summary just to say, hey, keep these things in mind because this is more or less what it means.
Because then they don't have to read it. They just have to read the executive summary.
Yeah, exactly. At least that would be something more than what happens today, which is nothing. Now that executive summary wouldn't bind somebody, but it would be a nice overview. Like, okay, and give a couple key concepts in that summary.
And train everyone.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It would give just a couple quick concepts. What does need to know mean?
Right.
What are the dates? So then you can just look at the document before you start. Dates, disclosure date, end date. Oh crap, we need a new NDA.
Yeah.
But one idea that I had from Don's is the day-to-day NDA template. In other words, every single day that you're going to meet with this other party, you sign a new NDA. And it's for that day. And this way, it's front and center for everybody every day. And you're never going to have to worry, especially when you're dealing with trade secret stuff. I mean, my God, you could destroy your trade secrets like that. And then they're gone. They're gone. Like however valuable. And do you want to be the man or woman or person who disclosed a trade secret without the NDA being relevant? You lose your job.
Aren't there some cases you can go to jail for that too, or does it have to be intentional?
It would have to be intentional. Yeah, you wouldn't. Yeah, but still, I mean, you could lose your job over it. I mean, you'd be humiliated. You were the one that gave away trade secrets, but we had an NDA in place. Did you read it? Yeah, I did read it. Well, did you notice that it was a one-way NDA and it didn't protect your disclosures?
Oh man.
So ultimately, though, the leverage thing. So two other things that we can conclude with. One is I have this friend come to me recently, and she's so frustrated because I told her, don't ever disclose confidential information, particularly trade secrets, without an NDA in place. And she said, you always told me that, but I went to a VC recently and I gave them the template that you gave me, to get them to sign it, and they wouldn't sign it. And I said, yeah, I'm not saying they'll sign it. I'm saying don't disclose unless they do sign it. And she said, yeah, but they won't sign it. So what am I going to do? And I said, look, you still can't disclose. You have to be able to sell your case to them to give them enough information that makes them want to sign it because they really want to hear what you have to say without giving them so much information that you have disclosed trade secret information without an NDA. Yeah. That's your first sales pitch. Your second sales pitch is invest in my company. Your first sales pitch is get them to sign that NDA,
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure it happens. I mean, it just takes, you've got to be a good salesperson.
Yeah, of course. And if you're not clever, if you can't get them to sign the NDA, you're not going to get them to give you $5 million.
Right.
Right. So I'll close with this final story. A friend of mine comes to me with his patentable idea. And he wants to disclose it to me, and I give him like my normal pitch. Okay, did you tell anyone yet? Because there's statutory bar dates, right? So I say, okay, good. You haven't told anybody. Do not disclose your idea to anybody without an NDA in place, and it's got to be the right NDA. So he's like, okay, I buy into that. So can I disclose it to you? He says. I said, yeah. Tell me what your idea is if you want. And he says, well, will you sign an NDA first? I said, absolutely not. He says, but you just told me don't disclose confidential information without an NDA in place. I said, I did say that, but I'm not signing it. Why won't you sign it? I said, why would I sign it? I'm doing you a favor. I'm not going to subject myself to getting sued for breach of contract when I'm not even getting paid. Right. So I said, it's the same situation. Convince me to sign this NDA, which he couldn't do, of course, but because I'm just doing the guy a favor. I'm not going to sign an NDA. Yeah. But anyway,
did he disclose goes to show. Anyway? And did you?
Yeah, he disclosed it anyway, and he's a friend, so of course I wouldn't disclose it. But just goes to show you, whoever has the leverage, you need to sell them on signing this NDA, then make your other sale.
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, this was awesome. Thanks for sharing these stories. I don't know why it's sort of weird saying this out loud, but NDAs are kind of an interesting topic.
Weirdly, I know. I know. Who would have thought an NDA would be anything that we could spend 20 minutes talking about?
Yeah. Well, if you, the audience, enjoyed listening to this podcast, stuff you should know about IP, non-disclosure agreements, please share it on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and Facebook, and wherever you like to hang out in social media. Leave us a comment. Let us know your thoughts. What do you think about NDAs? And hit the like button. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.